Let me start by asking you a simple question. What is behind you right now? Maybe you're sat on your sofa with nothing but your wall behind you, or maybe you're reading this on your commute to work and there's a bunch of people behind you. Then why, when you're alone in your house, do you sometimes feel like something is watching you? How can you be 100% sure that you're truly alone and that someone or something is not watching over your shoulder as you start to read this? Now, I know what you're thinking, that once you turn around, you can confirm what's behind you. However, once you turn, your perception of what's behind you switches. So how can you be sure that you're ever truly alone? Now I bet you're thinking that if you just get a mirror, you can see what's behind you, and you're correct. During that time, you're looking into that mirror, you can confirm what's there. However, you cannot spend your life staring into a mirror, and in my experience, it wouldn't help anything anyway. The point I'm trying to make is that there is something out there that follows each one of us and spends its life being unseen. So what do you think would happen if you saw something that's whole existence relied on it being unseen by all? Well, I'm going to try to explain it to you, and hopefully you can avoid the same fate as me. It was the beginning of last month. I had started working from home due to a promotion I received at work. Now, what I do for a living isn't important, but you should know that my job doesn't involve a lot of interactions with people, both in person and over the phone. I live alone, and although I live in an apartment complex with 30 other apartments, mine is the only one on the top floor. And even though it could use a coat of paint, it's pretty nice for the price. So between my apartment being the only one on the floor, the fact that I get all my groceries delivered, and I now work from home, my social life is non-existent. Honestly, it's never really bothered me as I'm not a people person. So when I'm alone in my apartment and I get the spine-chilling feeling that someone is behind me, I tend to just ignore it, as logically I know that's not possible. However, I now know that there is something always behind me, and after I saw it for the first time, it's only gotten more vivid. It was a normal day. I awoke to the sound of seagulls flying around outside my window and the gentle heat of the sun coming in from the gap in my almost pitch black curtains. I left my bedroom into the long branching hallway that extended from my front door and connected to all the rooms. As I was walking towards the kitchen, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, but as usual, I assumed it was my imagination, so I put it to the back of my mind and focused on getting ready for the day. I had the usual breakfast and turned my computer on to check my work schedule for the day. It was another couple of hours before the feeling that someone was behind me returned. I had taken a break from work and was out on my balcony having a cigarette when an ice-cold shiver ran down my spine, which caused me to physically shake. I chalked it up to the wind and finished my cigarette before returning to my desk. Once again, I did not check behind me, assuming it was all in my head. This time, though, the feeling didn't go away. In fact, it seemed to be growing more intense as the day went on. Later that evening, after finishing my work for the day, I laid down on my sofa, and even though I was laid down, it still felt like something was behind me. At one point, it even felt like someone was breathing on the back of my neck, which would not have been possible. It was that evening that I finally turned around to see what was there. I should have just ignored it. I never had an issue ignoring this feeling before, but after the day that I had, I couldn't take it anymore. I jumped up from my sofa faster than I thought I could move, and even though it was for only a second, I saw something sticking out of my sofa cushions. It was semi-translucent, blending into the sofa cushion perfectly. It had an almost human shape to its features, but there was black segments devoid of all light in place of its ears, eyes, and nose. I could not see a mouth, but it almost looked like large shark-like teeth were protruding from its neck. Then it disappeared. I stayed sitting on the floor of my living room, staring at the sofa for what could have been hours. I watched as the last flicker of daylight was consumed by the shadow of the night as it enveloped my sofa. I finally found the courage to stand up and proceeded to light a cigarette as I walked out onto my balcony. I took a deep drag from my cigarette as I tried to wrap my head around what I had just experienced. I honestly thought that the stress of living and working in my apartment all day, every day was finally getting to me. Even though I had semi-convinced myself that what I had seen was all in my head, I chose not to sit on my sofa as I ate dinner that evening. That night, the feeling of being watched did not return, and by the following morning, the face I saw became the last thing on my mind. I started my morning the same as the day before, and before I knew it, half the day had gone by, and I was stood out on my balcony enjoying the day. As I stared off into the distance, the uneasy feeling of being watched returned. My eyes started to frantically scan the horizon, but I already knew where the feeling was coming from. I could feel the icy breath on the back of my neck, which turned my whole body numb. It felt like I was standing out in a blizzard completely alone, and yet it also felt like I was being engulfed by hundreds of pairs of eyes. I took a deep breath before spinning around on the balls of my feet to face whatever was behind me. I was struck with absolute terror, as my face was mere inches from the thing in front of me. Unlike the day before, its almost translucent skin had more of a gray color to it. It had more substance to it, and the black segments it had instead of eyes seemed to be growing darker. There are no words to describe how meaningless everything felt as I stared at that thing before me. As I stood there, I realized that no matter how hard I tried, I could not avert my gaze away from its face. There was no way of knowing what the body of this thing looked like. It was as if I had lost control of my own eyes. What I could see in my field of vision was the slit in its neck where the shark-like teeth were protruding started to curl into an impossibly large smile. Even though I could feel its icy breath against my face, it made no sound, and the sound of the busy city below me started to fade away. It took all the energy I could muster to close my eyes, and once I gathered the courage to open them again, part of me was not surprised to see it was still in front of me. I took a step to the side and the other, and I had edged my way around it. At no point did its voidless eye sockets leave my gaze. I walked back into my apartment, and I could feel the thing's never-ending gaze staring through the back of my head. I tried everything to stop it. I sprinted into my bedroom, slamming the door behind me, and its gaze still found me even when it was not in my direct view. After that, it only got worse. Even when I left my apartment, I could still feel its gaze upon me. But that's not the worst part. As I walked down the high street, for every person I saw, there was one of these things that followed behind them. They were everywhere, but no one else seemed to notice them. I saw a kid running down the street towards a game shop with one of the things mere inches behind him. I could never see their body, only their now gray human-like faces. After that, I've taken to never leaving my apartment, as I cannot handle seeing that many of them at once. It's like they know that I and I alone can see them, so when I walk past the human they're following, they always turn to face me, and the feeling becomes unbearable. When there's more than one of them, they always turn to face me, and the feeling becomes unbearable when there's more than one of them watching me at once. I tried putting mirrors all around my apartment, hoping that if I could always see where it was, it would somehow make the feeling of being watched less intense. I tried putting mirrors all around my apartment, hoping that if I could always see where it was, it would somehow make the feeling of being watched less intense. But it was pointless. The more days that go on, the clearer that whatever this thing is, it's here to stay. I'm sorry about this, and I hope that you can forgive me. I'm writing this, and I hope that some of you will start seeing these things as well. Maybe, just maybe, if everyone can see them, the feeling of being watched will be less intense. They don't seem to want to hurt us. They just appear to be observers, always watching, always following. So you are never truly alone.